democracy is the way that we resolve our differences through a peaceful political process. And I've always wanted to be a part of trying to make that work, to avoid the sorts of nightmares that in too much of human history we've fallen into when we've lost democracies. The greatest threat to democratic governance in the United States is that we will lose it. And frankly, we already partially have.
That is an excerpt from an interview with 2023 MacArthur Fellow Ian Bassin, a lawyer and democracy advocate working to strengthen the norms, structures, and institutions of democratic governance in the United States. He is the executive director of Protect Democracy, an organization he co-founded in 2016 to counter authoritarian tactics and abuses of power that threaten to undermine election integrity and erode the rule of law. In this episode of Fellow Spotlight, we go in depth with Ian Bassin to learn more about him, his work, and his exceptional creativity. Let's hear more from his interview.
The United States is no longer considered a full democracy. In fact, we've actually really never been one. We've never achieved our highest aspiration of being a truly inclusive, multiracial democracy. But at least we were moving in the right direction. And in recent years, we've been going backwards. And that's been happening not just at home, but around the world. In the 21st century, democracy is in recession and authoritarian movements are on the rise. From Venezuela to Turkey, Hungary to Brazil, and yes, here in the United States. Autocratic movements are dismantling democracies, dismantling freedoms, and creating systems in which either a single person or a small faction are all powerful. I had the privilege of working as a lawyer in the White House counsel's office, and part of my job was to make sure that our officials abide by the rules that frankly make us a liberal democracy. And what you learn in doing that job is that most of those rules are not legally binding. They're just customs. They're just traditions. And in 2016, watching the tenor of our politics, my concern became what would happen if either a leader or an administration or a political movement was not only not interested in those rules, but was almost organized in opposition to them. It got scary very quickly when you start thinking about what happens when those rules are abrogated, when law enforcement becomes a sword to go after the leader's opponents and a shield to protect their allies and friends. When we launched Protect Democracy, we understood that for us to be successful, we needed a cross-ideological group, a group of progressives, moderates, and conservatives who disagree on politics and policy, but agree on the foundations of our system of government. And that we needed to use an all-of-the-above approach of every tool in the toolkit to protect democracy, from legal strategies to technologies to cultural interventions, to make sure that we're keeping the flame of democracy alive in the hearts of the public. The bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee put out a report on the 2016 election in which they concluded that the Russian government had tried to hack into some of the most important databases that we have to manage elections in this country, and that's the voter registration databases maintained by every state. Now, thankfully, although they got into several of them, they didn't make changes. But what our national security officials testified to was that they were essentially the jewelry thief casing the joint, looking at where the security cameras and the diamonds were in order to come back on the next attempt and take the crown jewels. And so what we've done is we've built a software that monitors public data about the voter file, looking for anomalous changes that would be invisible to the naked eye, but could be signs of foreign invasion and foreign attempts to interfere with our elections. And that system now, which tracks voter files, public data in 24 states, is able to spot not just the potential for foreign interference, but also inadvertent domestic error, and advise election officials to correct it before anyone loses their chance to vote. You know, when we launched in late 2016 and said we were out there to avoid worst case scenarios and to prevent the United States from declining into a more authoritarian form of government, more than a few people rolled their eyes about whether we were being a little bit too alarmist about what might come. Sadly, I think history has proven that prescient. And one of the things we were most concerned about was a crisis around the 2020 election that put us as a nation into uncharted waters, where neither the law nor precedent laid out the proper roadmap to get this country back to safer ground. And so what we did was we assembled a group of election law experts, national security experts, logistics experts, social media experts, pandemic experts from the right and the left to come together in advance to anticipate what sorts of crises could befall an election and to map out in advance, without knowing who would help or hurt, what the best protocols would be if that crisis were to manifest to get this country back to a stable and safe place. One of the things that the task force anticipated accurately was that because of the pandemic, it would take longer than usual for states to actually count all of those absentee ballots, and the results would likely not be known on the night of the election. And more than that, as those absentee ballots were counted, it was possible that the results that showed up on people's television screens would change over the course of 14 or 24 or 48 hours. And the fear that the National Task Force was worried about was that people would lose trust in the system because of it, or worse, that an unscrupulous actor might prematurely claim victory before the votes have been counted and actually sow doubt in our system. And so what the task force did for months leading up to the election was hold briefings for dozens of reporters producing hundreds of stories, helping to educate the public to expect that we wouldn't know the results likely the night of the election, and the results might change over the course of the counting of ballots, and that was not necessarily nefarious or a reason to suspect foul play. And indeed, by election day, a majority of Americans did understand that, did expect that, and so when an actor did try to take advantage of that and falsely claim victory prematurely, he was really only able to convince 30% of his own supporters that he was telling the truth. The democracy that our founders created was never designed to be self-executing. Our institutions don't protect themselves. The design from the get-go, from the first 3 words of the Constitution, we the people, was that if we were to have self-government in this country, it would be up to us to keep it vibrant, to keep it strong, to keep perfecting it. We have to invest in strengthening the laws on the books, the institutions that protect them, and how democracy exists in the hearts of the citizens that uphold it. Democracy is not an endpoint. It's a process. It's a system of government that allows people to self-govern and allows and expects each successive generation to contribute its part to keep it vibrant and up to date. If we're successful, then Protect Democracy will help launch the 4th wave of democracy. Democracy has risen and fallen in a series of waves since its modern advent, with the first wave rising in the early 19th century and then crashing to shore. Another wave rising in the wake of World War II, and then that wave receding as well. A 3rd wave, the widest and strongest yet, rising in the last quarter of the 20th century. And we're currently living in the recession of that 3rd wave. And the question for our generation is, how deep will that recession go? And will we, and when will we launch the 4th wave? That's got to be the ultimate goal, because that's the future that we're going to bequeath to the next generation.
Through his strategic leadership of Protect Democracy, Ian Bassin addresses structural vulnerabilities and biases in our democratic systems, with the goal of making our institutions more representative and resilient. Prior to co-founding Protect Democracy, he served as Associate White House Counsel and as Deputy Counsel in the New York City Mayor's Office. His writing on democracy, authoritarianism, and American law and politics has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and The Atlantic, among other publications. The MacArthur Fellows Program identifies and supports extraordinarily creative individuals with a track record of excellence who demonstrate the ability to impact society in significant and beneficial ways through their pioneering work. To learn more, visit us at macfound.org.